right, Mr. Jonathan Lewellyn.
Hey.
So good to see you.
Good. My pleasure.
Thank you for making the time to sit down with us and the good folks at CBC to talk about some youth ministry things.
Yeah.
So give us a little sense for who you are, where you've come from, and what you do now here at West Salem Foursquare Church.
The short story, one of 6 kids grew up in a small town where my father was the pastor of, we'll call it like the prominent church, highly attended, that kind of thing. And so there was no blending in. Everybody knew who I was and all that. And so that actually originally kind of deteriorated me, or what should I say, like turned me away from wanting to be involved in church leadership, that kind of thing. And so, however, growing up in a farm community in Eastern Washington, I wanted to get out of the borders. I wanted to head down, so I went to Southern California, which led me to Life Pacific College, where God and I had an incredible encounter. And I always describe it as I was maybe running parallel to what I think God wanted me to do. I was getting as close as I could without actually getting on that path. And it was my junior year, and actually Ron Swore was at a dinner. I don't even know if he realizes this. I was at a dinner with Ron Swore, Robert Flores, a few other people. And it was at that dinner, nothing special, nobody spoke any prophetic vision over my life, but seeing the way they lived their life and interact and how they were committed to the communities they lived in, the churches they served, I knew that was my life. And so I made the plunge and decided I'm committing to being in full-time pastoral ministry, whatever that looks like, and was so fortunate as I graduated from Life Pacific College to receive a job here at West Salem Foursquare Church, and that was June 12th, 2010 was my first day on the job here. So we're coming up on 8 years. Wow. Yeah.
Let's go back to your experience at Life Pacific College. Tell me a little bit about what you learned through that experience that you feel has helped prepare you to succeed in the environment that you're at now.
For me specifically, that's where I fell in love with God. That's where I became committed and passionate, which therefore then led me to this lifelong call to ministry. And so the relationships that I acquired there I would say, are really the heartbeat of my life and why I still am in ministry, why I'm able to love my family the way I do. And then I'm not necessarily driven by the academic world, if you will. However, I did receive not just the education, but the know-how to exegete, to dive into the Word, how to take maybe what would be a confusing biblical passage and say, great, but now how do I contextualize that? What does that mean to my culture? And so,
I spent 7 years working in youth with Ryan Brown, Spencer Schauber.
I see. We should switch seats. You should tell me what's going on.
Mostly in a different capacity, but I always believe that if you're able to communicate effectively to middle school and high school students, you can communicate effectively almost anywhere.
Wow.
Tell me a little bit about what you've learned in trying to take a very ancient text and a very odd set of rules to the mind of a 15-year-old.
Yeah.
And then communicate that in a way that makes sense in the world that they live in and occupy.
Yeah.
I think, to be honest, I think the world today underestimates youth, middle school and high schoolers. They don't realize how much they actually do care. I would say that their motivation is different, and is probably motivated to receive notoriety, to be accepted, and so for them, what that comes down to is then, how does this text and what does it mean to where I'm currently motivated, right? And so I don't only think it's good to recognize their motivation, but then to help develop and mature their motivation. So, for example, at the end of my life, I want to hear the Lord say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." I mean, that is my motivation. I'm driven by the acceptance and the approval of God the Father. Now, if I'm working for that, I'm going to burn out and I'm going to fail. You come to this point where you realize I'm actually working from that. I'm already accepted and loved in His eyes, right? So how do we communicate that to a student then, right? You're saying, right? Because we're in a world of how many likes, how many comments. We post the best of ourselves to receive the approval of others, right? And so when a student realizes they're not achieving that, or they have achieved it and they still have that gap or that hole, I think that's where we come in and we say, here's what the incredible thing is. God actually created you with the most amount of likes you could ever receive, the most amount of, and so in doing that, I hope I'm answering your question, but in doing that, we're using their language, we're finding out their motivation, we're using their language to really communicate what the gospel is saying. And so, man, if they want to know they're accepted, then I first would start by saying, hey man, like, how's your Instagram life these days? How's your this, that, whatever? How many W's do you got on Fortnite? That's the big thing right now. I know nothing about video games, but guess what? Now all of a sudden I have to exegete Xbox as well as, New King James. And so discovering what their motivation is, what they're into, and then saying, this is how it correlates, this is how it relates to the gospel. Now, I didn't make that up. Why is most of the Bible's analogies about farming? That's what they knew then, and so hopefully that answered the question there.
Yeah. The principle there that you identified in terms of helping understand what makes that person tick first, and then knowing the big story of how the gospel works, and then trying to introduce the two in a way that makes sense. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about how evangelism works in this demographic. How do we... the call to discipleship, the call to radical self-denial is so contrary to the narrative of the world around us. How have you tried to approach that challenge?
That's such a great way to put it, man. The call to self-denial. That's so foreign to, and it's not just this generation, that's foreign to all generations. It's just more public in this generation with the excess of modern technology and et cetera. And so, this idea of evangelism, I will be so honest, is something that I don't feel great at. I feel very challenged by it. And it's funny you ask this because it's been my kind of 2018 challenge. We've used language now within our youth ministry. We meet Sunday nights. Sunday night is youth ministry night for our high school students, and Sunday mornings are our middle school students. And so we've changed our language, and I said, Monday through Saturday, we're doing everything we can to promote, to advertise, to invite, anything we can do to get students in the doors of our church, in our life, what we're doing. And then Sunday, we're not thinking about that at all anymore. We're thinking about who's there. We say it's not about how many there is at our youth event, it's who's there. It's not about how many, it's about who. And what the problem is, I think we focus on who's not there and we neglect who is there. So where's that balance? Because I want more. Unashamedly, we have an incredible auditorium that could seat close to 1,000 students. I want that, I want that. But if I want that more than I want the one who's in front of my face, then I'm missing it. And so, you have evangelism, you have discipleship. Where do those meet? Here's what I know. Students, they need to know that they're loved and cared and there's an interest in them. And if I don't even take the time to know their name or remember their name, which I'm horrible at, by the way, then why do they care about the other name that I'm going to tell them about, in the name of Jesus? And so for me, evangelism starts with that. Who are you? Who are you? And then let's talk, then we'll figure out who is Jesus, who am I, who is the church, and that kind of thing. And so that's what my Monday through Saturday, and I think this is also new and so raw. So I don't even have a good case study or example to give you really at this moment, other than I'm just sitting at the frozen yogurt spot or Jamba Juice or coffee and just trying to have conversation with students, take interest in their life, and go to their track meet tonight, at 5 o'clock. So start with who are you? That's my goal. Who are you? What's your family? Give me your dynamic. Yeah. And then the door's open.
I think it's beautiful. I think the thing that I'm resonating with now is that hospitality is the future of mission. That we engage best around the gospel in that context where people understand that we see them, that we're happy that they're here with us, and that we get to know we get to know them, and where us and them now becomes, or me and you now becomes us. I think that's really neat.
Wow, I like hospitality is now.
Yeah, the future of the mission. Tell me a little bit about your process for self-development and growth as a leader. How do you make sure that the Jonathan Lewellyn of 2018 is a more effective minister than last year?
Yeah, that's good.
Well, I am by nature, or maybe it was nurtured, I don't know, but a comfortable person. If I go to Subway, I have the same sandwich. I'm at the same drink at coffee. I like familiarity, and so for me, I think the best way to learn is to experience new. By definition, that is learning. And so that means taking a risk. That means putting yourself in a position to fail, to be uncomfortable, that kind of thing. Now, I don't think you always have to put yourself in a position to fail, because there's people that already did that for us. So. But for me, as I admitted earlier, I'm not necessarily the most driven academically. I study the Word. I love the Word. I don't want to put in the time for homework. I don't want to have to sit down and take your exam. I'll do a ton of BuzzFeed quizzes, right? But and so if I can experience, if I can do new things, if I can get myself in front of a gentleman like you, a podcast, I think that's the way I develop. That's the way I learn. I'm really addicted to podcasts right now, and I think. Give me a couple of ones. Sure. Oh, sure. I love Timothy Keller. I think he's going to give such a solid biblical teaching, and so I get from him there. There's some in the youth ministry cycle, in the world of youth ministry. If you can get in front of Rich Wilkerson Jr., Chad Veach, you're going to get the passion and the creativity that comes. I recently had listened to Wayne Cordero, Craig Gashel for a lot of his leadership stuff right now, but ultimately I still fall back on my dad. I just love learning from my father, which is funny because I didn't when I was younger, of course. But the key there is I try to get a good balance, because otherwise I will turn into whoever I'm listening to.
One of my great fears in ministry is to be in ministry for so many years. But really what's happened is that the first or second year of ministry has been now repeated so many times. Yeah. Instead of growing and having 20 years of ministry experience, what I actually have is 2 years of ministry experience, the second year repeated 18 times. And I think that antidote there of exposing yourself to what else is going on, what are, because the things that we gain in our formational stage, if we're not careful, we then move into another, like a functional stage, and we don't focus on the formation, and we just end up repeating the same messages or the same techniques that we've seen.
Now I have that fear. Thank you.
When we look at these, we'll call them maybe more established, or these veteran leaders, Timothy Keller, Wayne Cordero, Craig Gashel, I'm looking at their now.
Yeah.
I'm in my 8th year of ministry, right? But I'm looking at their 30th, 20th, and I'm trying to repeat what they do. And there's some benefits to that. I'm not going to deny there's some wisdom in that. However, I need to look at what did they do in year 8? What did they do as a youth pastor? What disciplines did they have and character did they have? Because instead, what I'm trying to do is take my small youth ministry in Salem, Oregon, and create the next Life Church.
There's a whole new generation that's coming out of Life Pacific and Canby Bible College and people. And for a lot of people who feel called into ministry, youth ministry is often one of the first places that they end up landing.
Sure.
What advice or wisdom have you gleaned over the years in watching young leaders come up through your system or other places to help them be able to learn from someone else's mistakes so that they can start really adding value early on in their ministry career?
That's good.
I have two things I'm pretty passionate about when this question is asked. I've had this conversation before. One is from my father, and one is from some failed leadership and volunteers that I have had in the past. My father said this. People ask him, hey, when you're leading your church, what's your demographic? What age group are you going for and whatever? And he responds, breathing, the people, And the reason I say that is because if you view youth ministry as a stepping stone, you have no right to be in youth ministry. Ooh. And I think that's what happens. And I don't mean that's not always intentional. But if you're using youth ministry, that means you're using youth. That means you're using students. And students don't need someone that have their eyes on being the big man, the boss, the lead pastor, whatever it is. They need someone to have their eyes on this generation. And so that's what when I first was hired in youth ministry, I was hired because I wanted to be a youth pastor, and that's the dream I had. But do people say, you're going to be a senior pastor someday? You have this or that or whatever. Sure, they can recognize that. That's fine. But my eyes aren't on that. Will that happen? Possibly, and most likely. There's so many different similarities and parallels to next steps in ministry, whatever you want to look at, that take place within youth ministry. That, of course, you're getting trained, whether it's intentionally or non-intentionally. You just are. However, be in the ministry you're in, because people matter where they are. And so it's the same principle, like I said. If I'm looking in my auditorium on a Sunday night with my high school students and I'm only seeing the empty chairs, then I'm neglecting the butts that are in the chairs, And so that would be the first thing I would say. The second thing is this: be more in love with the youth that you pastor than being a youth pastor. There is a disease right now with student ministries, pastors, and I'm just going to appoint it to student ministries, pastors, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is beyond just our people. We love the imagery, the notoriety that comes with being a youth pastor. And we're able to post pictures of ourselves on a stage with the cool lights. We're able to be the guest speaker where there's a reserved seat in the front row with a basket of snacks and water, and we're able to present only our best jokes and our best stories and our best message that get the most response, and all that does is create in us a false imagery of what ministry is. Ministry is opening up your home and sharing your food that is already limited. It's, and so be in love with the youth that you're pastoring. Don't be in love with being a youth pastor, because you'll start to get a false imagery of what Jesus presented to us as ministry when he was washing his disciples' feet, So those are the two things that I have learned the hard way, in both personal experience as well as seeing it in others that have been a part of my leadership.
That's beautiful.
So,
thank you.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
This is somewhat off topic and not something that I read, but I've been fascinated of late with this, what seems to be a growing rash of people who are not finishing well in ministry, who by reasons of sexual misconduct or alcoholism or burnout have exited their ministries under a cloud of disgrace.
Right.
And as young leaders, looking to try to honor the call of God on our lives, try to serve the church and the people well. I guess I'm just kind of curious, maybe this is not an area that you pay a lot of attention to, but when you think about this idea of finishing well, and knowing that you don't just wander into a successful and integrous career, how do you process the temptations that are there, the places where you can really get sidetracked? How do you keep yourself, what you feel is in a sustainable and healthy leadership position?
Years ago I heard someone say, and I don't even remember who it was, but they said most people are not burning out. They're actually just getting disconnected with God. And so I think that's where you have to start. Don't even focus on I can't burn out. No, focus on just staying connected with the Lord and what all that entails. I know that you have had good conversation with AJ Swoboda, and just the value and the principle of Sabbath. And that's not just something that's a little extra that the Lord gives us to enjoy. That's an essential to staying connected to God and thriving in our ministries. Not just surviving, not just ending well, we survived, we made it. No, we thrived clear until the end, and whatever that means and looks like, The other thing I would say is that I have decided, I've taken on a philosophy in my life where I've made pre-decisions. You know what I mean? We decide before we're ever faced with a situation. This is what Daniel did in the Bible. When King Nebuchadnezzar established this new law, no more worshiping any other god except for me, King Nebuchadnezzar, Daniel didn't have to sit and go, am I going to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar or am I going to bow down to the God who I know? No, he had decided in his life from a very early stage, I worship God and God alone. And so when it came to lion's den or bowing down at the feet of this dude, he said, let's go. Let's go to the lion's den. And so what pre-decisions have you made? And so for me, I've just marked my life. I've decided I want to be just a person that's considered faithful. I want to be faithful. I want to be faithful in my marriage, as a father, in my relationship with the Lord, of course, but then even to my church and my calling. So when I came on and was hired at this church, West Salem Foursquare Church, Pastor John Phelan, in my mind, when I was looking for jobs and ministry opportunities, I said, I want to go somewhere where I can see myself for 5 years. I want to be there for 5 years. Now, that, of course, is not completely in my control, but I want to do everything in my power in my life to be there for at least 5 years. 5 years hit, we'll revisit the goal or whatever. And so to me, that's the mark of faithfulness. I'm going to do everything I can to maintain and stay in this goal. So that way, when other offers did come up, and they did, and I'm not saying that to pat my head, it's easy to stay faithful when you only have one option, but when other offers came up, when there were temptations, when there were other things, I'd already decided in my mind, that's actually counter to what I've established God calling me to. And so Phil Knight, in his book, founder of Nike, he said when they were developing and designing these shoes and they were trying to be the ground floor of just this new technology of footwear and everything, he said they never started with the end product. They said these are the things that we're going to do, and then we'll find out what we have at the end. That's great for shoes. I actually am opposite. I've started with the end product. I know I want to hear good, well done, good and faithful servant. I know I want my life to be marked by, I want somebody to say, he was faithful. So I know the end product. I know what my shoe is. So what disciplines now do I have to incorporate in my life in order to be faithful? And so I've established that, just a good, solid, biblical foundation for my life. I need to be devoted to the Word. What relationships do I have in my life? So who do I have speaking in my life? Who are the pastors and influences in my life?
Who are the friends in my life? A month ago was in Austin, Texas, with some of my best friends in the world. Colin Reed was with us. And we golfed a lot. We ate really good food. But we spent hours in the living room worshiping God together, crying, praying for each other, encouraging each other. Because that's a discipline I need in my life. I need people in my corner that will allow me to end well. Sabbath. I don't do that. I don't do it well, admittedly. You don't rest. You don't give yourself, a time with the Lord, devoted, set aside to be loved, and then you're going to burn out. So what things what disciplines don't I have that I need to recognize I do need to have? So, yeah. I'm on track. I'm on track, and through the grace of the Lord and the love of others around me, I'm hoping to be there. So,
any final thoughts or words of wisdom?
Oh gosh,
for Bible school students thinking about youth ministry.
I don't know wisdom, but encouragement. Man, if you are maybe already enrolled, the CVC is a wonderful school. I support and love that institution, not only for the academics you're receiving, but the experience you're getting, as well as I just think the belief, how you even handle the administrative side of the school, phenomenal. But I would say this, you're on the right track. If you are already attending a Bible college or you are looking, I would say follow it and trust the Lord in it. If He's called you to ministry, then He's not just going to dump you in untrained, unprepared, ill-equipped. The Bible even talks about that. He gives us the gifts and the training that we need in order to represent and lead well. And so my encouragement with this, take it seriously. Learn from the people who are investing and care about you. I don't know what all you're paying your professors, but I know it's not enough to the wisdom that they're giving and possess. And to me that says a lot, because they're not in it for the money. They're in it because they believe in who has a call for their life. They want to see them through it and in it. And so trust and love the people that are there. And then lastly, specifically like towards the youth ministry call, be a youth pastor. Don't be a friend. Relationship and friendships are going to happen. They just do. Students need someone that they see at the next step. This is what I tell our leaders. I tell our high school leaders, I said, high schoolers, there's nobody cooler to a middle schooler than a high schooler. It's what they see them. They can see themselves as an incoming freshman more than they can see themselves as a one-day father or mother or business worker or owner, whatever it is. To our high schoolers, there's nobody cooler than a college kid. To our college students, there's nobody cooler than young families. And so I just would say that just understand the influence you have and who you have in it. We all have influence. Everybody has influence. Are you intentional with your influence? And so be intentional with that. Hope that's good. Hope you have a good editing skills, man.
Oh my gosh. You're a great interview. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you, man. I love what you're doing.
Thank you so
This is
much.
awesome. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
that was cool.
Cool.
Loved it.
I hope so, man. Hope so.